Welcome back to the deep dive. You've brought us, well, quite a deep one today, haven't you? Looks like we're centered around a new research paper.
That's right. A really interesting preprint, actually. It's currently under review, but it tackles something pretty fundamental about AI models.
Okay, fundamental how? What's the core question here?
It's asking about the theoretical limits of standard transformers. The architecture that's behind so many of these large language models everyone's talking about. What can they really do, computationally speaking?
So moving beyond just performance benchmarks and into their actual, inherent capabilities.
Exactly. And the goal today is really to unpack the core argument of this paper, some of its, frankly, surprising conclusions. We want to dig into the academic rigor and, importantly, the key innovations they present. They seem to have resolved a pretty significant open question.
Sounds fascinating. And you mentioned it's about standard transformers. Is there a specific flavor they focus on?
Yes, and that's crucial. They're looking at fixed precision transformers. So think the kind of math our actual computers do, not infinite precision. They also specify soft attention and strict masking, meaning the model can't cheat and look into the future.
Got it. So closer to the real-world models we use, not some idealized theoretical construct. That makes the findings potentially much more relevant.
Precisely. A lot of earlier work used models that were easier to analyze, maybe assuming perfect numbers or different attention rules. This paper tries to bridge that gap.
Okay, let's set the stage then. This idea of theoretical limits. You mentioned expressive power. Can you break that down for us? What does that mean in this context?
Sure. So in theoretical computer science, particularly formal language theory, expressive power basically asks what kinds of patterns or what kinds of formal languages can a computational system recognize or generate.
So not just English or French, but any set of sequences with rules. Like, can it tell if parentheses are balanced or if a string has an even number of A's?
Exactly that kind of thing. It's about the fundamental kinds of problems a model could solve if given enough data and training time. It tells us what's inherently within its grasp and maybe what's truly beyond its reach, no matter how much we train it.
And understanding this for transformers is important because
it helps us understand their fundamental strengths and weaknesses. If we know their theoretical limits, we know what kinds of tasks they might inherently struggle with, or where we might need different architectures entirely.
Right. And you said previous work used idealized models, which might have, overestimated their power?
Potentially, yes, or at least didn't capture the constraints of real-world computation. So the specific open question this paper claims to resolve is, what is the exact expressive power of these more realistic fixed precision transformers with soft attention and masking?
Okay, the suspense is building. What is the breakthrough finding? What precise limit did they identify?
Okay, so the central result, the real innovation here, is that they establish an exact equivalence. They argue that these fixed precision transformers are exactly as expressive as something called LTL.
LTL, diamond minus. Okay, you've got to unpack that alphabet soup for us. Linear temporal logic, right? But what's the catch? What does that mean in plain English?
Right, LTL is linear temporal logic. It's a way to talk about properties of sequences over time. The crucial part here is the F, the diamond symbol, usually means eventually or at some point. The minus sign restricts it to the past. So F means formula phi was true at some point in the past.
So LTLA is a logic that can only make claims about what has already happened in the sequence relative to the current position.
Precisely. It can say things like, we saw an A sometime before this point, or every single up to now has been a B. But it cannot easily express things about the future or relationships that require, say, counting across the whole sequence or matching things arbitrarily far apart.
Like, it couldn't easily say the number of A's so far is even.
Exactly. Or for every A seen so far, there will eventually be a B. That kind of future-looking or global counting property is generally outside LTL. The paper uses the example L, which is just the set of all strings that contain at least one A. You just need to look back and find one.
Wow. So, okay, the claim is that these powerful transformers, when using fixed precision, are fundamentally limited to the power of a logic that only looks backward. That feels quite restrictive.
It does seem counterintuitive, given what they achieve empirically. But that's the core theoretical finding.
And the academic ends of mailing down this specific equivalence?
It's huge because it provides the first exact characterization for this type of transformer model. It's not just an upper bound. It's no more powerful than X, or a lower bound. It's at least as powerful as Y. It's saying the power is precisely equivalent. It pins down the computational nature of these widely used models to a well-understood class from logic and formal language theory. That resolves the open question very definitively.
Okay, that is significant. But how on earth do you prove something like that? It can't just be intuition. They must have built from theoretical bridges.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the paper really shines, connecting the transformer to several established theoretical concepts. They build a chain of equivalences.
The chain. Okay, lay it out for us.
So first they show that this LTL is equivalent to something called PFO2.
PFO2. Okay, another one. What's that stand for?
That's the pass fragment of first-order logic with two variables using only the less than relation. So it's a type of logic that talks about positions in a sequence, but again, restricted. You can only use two variable names. You can only compare positions using less than. And critically, quantifiers are restricted to look only at past positions relative to some reference point.
So another past-focused logic, just framed differently, a kind of stepping stone in the proof.
Exactly. It serves as a useful intermediate representation, linking the temporal logic perspective to a more classical logic on strings perspective.
Okay, so LTLA equals PFO2. What else is in this chain?
They also show LTLA is equivalent to partially ordered deterministic finite automata, or PODFAs.
DFAs. Okay, those I remember. Simple state machines, right? Read a symbol, change state. What does the partially ordered part mean? How does that limit them?
Right. A standard DFA can have cycles, loop back, potentially count things, recognize complex patterns. A partially ordered DFA has a restriction on its state transitions. You can imagine the states having some kind of order, and the machine can essentially only move forward through this order. It can't transition back to a state. It's already conceptually passed in a way that would allow for arbitrary loops or complex counting mechanisms needed for certain patterns.
So it's like a DFA that can't really cycle back in complex ways. It has a sort of one-way progression through its logic.
That's a good way to think about it. It limits the kinds of memory or counting the automaton can perform.
And these POPFAs, are they connected to other known theoretical classes?
Yes, and this completes the bridge. It's known from prior work by big names like Brzezowski, Fitch, Simon, Tesson theory, and that PO. DFAs are equivalent to other mathematical structures like R-trivial monoids, and a class of formal power series called left-deterministic polynomials.
Whoa, okay, so R-trivial monoids, left-deterministic polynomials, those sound deep in abstract algebra and automata theory.
They are, but the point is, by linking the fixed precision transformer to LTL, the paper connects it right into this web of well-studied, mathematically understood classes, all known to have certain computational limitations.
That's quite a theoretical tapestry they've woven, linking practical AI architecture to these deep theoretical concepts. Okay, let's circle back to something you stressed earlier. Fixed precision. How does that actually cause the limitation? How does it prevent the transformer from being more powerful? And specifically, how did the paper show it could even simulate LTL given that constraint? Seems like a key technical hurdle.
It absolutely is, and tackling this is really one of the paper's core technical innovations, as you said. The issue with fixed precision using, say, 32-bit floating point numbers is that the attention mechanism can't maintain perfect accuracy over long distances. When calculating attention scores, weights for positions very far in the past can become incredibly tiny, essentially rounding down to zero due to the limited number of bits.
So the model effectively develops a limited attention span. It can't reliably see or attend to things beyond a certain distance, let's call it Nmax.
Precisely. A single attention head, working with fixed precision, simply cannot reliably check if something happened, say, 1,000,000 steps ago if Nmax is much smaller than that. The signal gets lost in the numerical noise or limitations.
But wait, the operator in LTL needs to check the entire past. Was phi true at any point before now? How can the transformer simulate that if its individual attention heads have this limited Nmax span? Seems like a contradiction.
Exactly the problem they had to solve, and their solution is quite clever. They show that the transformer can overcome this local limitation by using its global structure, specifically its multiple layers and the feed-forward networks.
How does that work, roughly?
Well, the idea, at a high level, is that you don't need one head to see everything. You can break the problem down. Maybe one layer attends to the recent pass within its Nmax. Another layer can then look at the output of the first layer, effectively summarizing a block of the past. The feed-forward networks between layers are powerful enough to combine information across different heads and different positions or dimensions of the hidden state.
Ah, so they're using the layers and the computations within the feed-forward parts to kind of stitch together these limited views, performing logical operations across dimensions to check properties over longer ranges.
Exactly. They argue that you can use combinations of dimensions in the hidden state to represent logical facts, and the layers build up the ability to check the property over the entire relevant past by composing these limited span checks. It's a sophisticated construction showing how the architecture's pieces can work together to simulate a logic that seems, at first glance, to be beyond the reach of its fixed precision components.
That is elegant. using the model's own structure to compensate for the limitations of its parts.
Okay, so given this theoretical boundary equivalent to LTL or PODFAs, what can these transformers not do? What are some concrete examples of patterns or languages that fall outside this class?
The theory predicts they'll struggle with anything requiring computational power beyond LTL. The paper gives some classic examples often used to test computational limits, things like bounded Dyke languages.
Dyke languages, those are the balance parentheses, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's
wait.
simple nested structures. Or languages that need modular counting, like parity checking if the total number of A's in a string is even or odd.
And why are those hard for a system limited to LTL or these partially ordered automata?
Well, think about balance parentheses. You need to match an opening parenthesis with its corresponding closing one, which could be very far away. This requires a memory mechanism, like a stack, that LTL doesn't really have, and parity requires counting modulo 2 across the entire sequence. ATO-DFA, because of its restricted forward-only nature, fundamentally can't loop back or maintain state in the way needed to keep track of an unbounded count like that.
Okay, so the limitation isn't just abstract. It rules out some patterns that seem, well, relatively simple conceptually, but require a type of computation these models lack.
Right. And the paper didn't just stop at the theory, they ran experiments too. Good. Does the practical behavior match the theory?
It seems to, yes. Very strongly, in fact. They trained fixed precision transformers on a bunch of these formal languages, and just as the theory predicted, the models learned the languages inside the LTL class, the ones equivalent to left deterministic polynomials, very well, often perfect accuracy, quite quickly.
And the ones outside, like Dyke or parity.
Those they consistently struggled with or just failed to learn, even on fairly simple examples. It wasn't about needing more data or training time. The performance just plateaued, hitting a wall exactly where the theory suggested they would.
Any other evidence?
Yeah, they also included some visualizations figure 2 in the paper, looking at the transformer's hidden states during processing. For the languages it could learn, the internal states seemed to organize in a way consistent with the simple structure of a PODFA. For the languages it couldn't learn, the internal states looked much messier, without that clear structure. Qualitative evidence, but it fits the story.
That's pretty convincing alignment between the mathematical theory and the experimental results. Does this apply just to models recognizing patterns or to language models too?
They extended the analysis to transformer language models as well to kind of predict the next word. They showed that their expressive power, in terms of the distributions they can represent or the sequences they can generate, is also bounded by this same LTO-DFA class.
And experiments on LMs showed the same pattern.
Yes, similar results. They tested LMs on generating sequences from different formal languages and found they performed well in languages within the class, but struggled with ones outside, like a language called RDP1, which isn't a left deterministic polynomial.
Okay, so pulling this all together, the big contribution here is nailing down this exact theoretical boundary for a realistic, fixed precision transformer model.
Exactly. It's the first exact characterization for this specific setup, fixed precision, soft attention, strict masking. It resolves that open question by showing this precise equivalence to LTL, and through that, to PODFAs and related classes.
And why is that so important again?
Because it moves our understanding beyond idealized models. It gives us a concrete, mathematically grounded grasp of the actual computational capabilities and limitations of the kinds of transformers being deployed. It connects their empirical behavior, including some observed weaknesses, to deep established results in theoretical computer science. It's a really significant step, academically speaking. The authors Jiaoda and Ryan Cotterell at ETH Zurich have definitely made a mark with this preprint.
It really is fascinating how deep theory can shed light on the practical tools everyone's using.
Absolutely. It provides a kind of map showing the terrain these models can navigate and where the cliffs might be.
So let's leave our listeners with something to chew on. Here's a thought for you. If these standard transformers, as this rigorous paper argues, are fundamentally limited, computationally equivalent to a logic that really only looks backward, struggling with basic counting or nested structures, what does that truly imply about their ability to genuinely understand the full complexity of human language? Languages full of long-distance dependencies, nesting, subtle counting. Or what about their capacity for advanced logical reasoning? Does this theoretical boundary suggest that maybe we'll need more than just bigger transformers? That perhaps fundamental architectural changes or entirely different AI approaches might be required to tackle problems needing computational power beyond this LTL limit?
That's definitely the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? A lot of future research hinges on that.
Indeed, it does. Thanks for guiding us through this really insightful deep dive today.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.